Welcome to the Know Before They Grow podcast. Today, Josh and Jess have a spirited discussion about the topic. Is it illegal to conduct a DNA test without the consent of the other party? So sit back and take notes during this special informational episode.
All right, buckle up because we are diving deep into the world of DNA testing today. You guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff for this one. Articles, forum threads. Someone even sent in what looks like a text conversation about the legality of DNA testing without consent.
Yeah, I can see how that could get messy.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated than you might think. See, we watch TV, and there's always that big DNA test reveal, a long-lost sibling, secret parent, bam, case closed, right?
Like it's always so cut and dry.
But one of the things you sent in actually called out those peace of mind DNA tests, the ones you can order online. It said they wouldn't hold up in court at all. That kind of blew my mind. Isn't a DNA test like a DNA test?
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But it all comes down to this thing called chain of custody, which basically means proving where that DNA sample came from every step of the way. Think of it like evidence in a courtroom. It needs to be airtight. And those online tests are made for convenience, not necessarily strict legal proof.
So like the difference between a snapshot and like official evidence photos.
Exactly, and that's why understanding those differences matters so much. You even highlighted how New York State has super strict regulations on all this, tougher than a lot of other places.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn that. It's not just about consent either. Sometimes you need a doctor to sign off or even a court order to get a test that's actually legally sound.
Oh, absolutely, and it's different everywhere.
Really? It's not like a national standard.
Nope. Which is exactly why you got to do your research, look up the specific laws in your state, because what flies in one place might not in another.
Good to know. Take notes, everybody. But it gets even more complicated when you start talking about kids, right? I mean, a kid can't exactly consent to a test. But one of the things you sent talked about how a paternity acknowledgement can change things up.
Right. So usually a parent or guardian has to be the one to consent for anyone under 18. But a paternity acknowledgement is basically a legal document where someone says, yeah, I could be the father. And in a lot of places, that gives them certain rights, which can include asking for a DNA test, even if the mother doesn't agree.
Wow. So you've got the potential father's rights, the mother's wishes, and then, of course, the child caught in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, and it just shows why DNA testing is about so much more than just the science. It's about relationships, legal stuff, and potentially a lot of emotional baggage, too.
So it's like they say truth is stranger than fiction, right? But what about those times when you can't just, like, ask for a DNA sample? You know, maybe the alleged father's not around to ask. I read about something called grandparent testing or even using a half-sibling. That's like next-level DNA detective work.
It is, and it's totally a thing. It's called family reconstruction testing. Basically, if you can't get a DNA sample from the person directly, you can analyze the DNA of their close relatives to try and piece together a genetic profile.
Okay, but there's got to be a catch, right?
Well, the further you get from a direct comparison, the less accurate the results might be. So, like, if you're using a grandparent's DNA instead of the father's, there's a bigger margin for error. It's still scientifically sound, but it's more about probabilities than certainties.
So it's like results may vary, but on a DNA test?
Kinda, yeah. Plus, even with those kinds of tests, you still need consent. And in this case, it's from the relatives, which could make for some awkward family dinners, if you ask me.
Oh, totally. Pass the potatoes and can I swab your cheek for a sec? I'm doing a little ancestry research, for fun.
Exactly. It really drives home the point that DNA testing is about way more than just science. There are real people and complicated family dynamics involved, which makes things a lot messier than they seem on TV.
100%. And speaking of the bigger picture, you shared this article by Elisa Gilson from the FTC that really got me thinking about the future of all this. We're not just talking about individual results here. It's about what happens to that data, the privacy questions, and how it all affects us on a larger scale. It's easy to get caught up in the who's your daddy aspect of all this, but this article made me think about the long game. It's not just about your results. It's about where that data goes, who has access to it,
Yeah, and the thing about genetic data is it's not like other information. It's not just about you. It reveals stuff about your family, their history. You can't exactly hit delete on your DNA if things go sideways.
That's what really freaked me out. It's like, once it's out there, it's out there. And the article mentioned that the FTC is going after some companies for not being careful with this data. They even called out CRI Genetics, Vita Gene, Genelink. I'd never even heard of some of these companies, and they're sitting on this incredibly personal information.
And that's the problem, right? People don't always realize what they're handing over. They get caught up in tracing their ancestry or whatever, and they don't think about that fine print.
Right. Like, what are they agreeing to? The article mentioned something about dark patterns, which sounded kind of ominous.
Yeah, so dark patterns are basically ways that websites can kind of trick you into doing stuff you might not otherwise do. Confusing menus, misleading language, all designed to get you to just click agree without really thinking about it.
Oh, wow. So it's like they're being sneaky on purpose.
Pretty much. And that's a big deal when you're talking about something as sensitive as DNA information.
Makes you really stop and think before you click that I agree button. So, big takeaway for everyone listening. Your DNA is powerful stuff. It's valuable, it's personal, and it's not something to just hand over without thinking twice.
100%. The more we learn about DNA and what we can do with it, the more important it is to educate ourselves about the potential downsides.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from secret DNA tests to the future of genetic privacy. But the conversation definitely doesn't end here. Keep those questions coming, and we'll keep digging deeper.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Know Before They Grow podcast. Please make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you need reliable DNA relationship testing services, don't hesitate to contact IDTO at 88-820-40583 or click the link in the description to visit them online today. Thank you for listening. Take care.
Remember, it's better to know before they grow.